you. Thank you so much, Amani. Appreciate it. I usually start with praise the Lord. I trust you're all well. My name is Julian Kyula, and it's good to see all of you. I'm going to spend the next few minutes sharing some quick thoughts with you about thinking big and dreaming big. I want to appreciate Joram and the entire team for putting this amazing event together, because we need these. I have a few points I want you to capture. One is you have two assets in life, time and energy. Two key assets in life, time and energy. So as you build your business, you must quantify it in those two aspects, time and energy. The second thing I want you to look at if you want to think big and dream big is you must partner with experience. And I'll build on that a little bit. Partner with experience. Thirdly, you must partner with capacity. Fourth, you should partner with knowledge. And I'll touch on these. If you didn't catch them, just let me kick off so you can see. I have a presentation, and I'll try and skip through so that I can maximize my time with you. So I'll just start immediately to my first slide, please. Is there like a clicker I should use, or just someone's controlling it for me? Next slide, please. Thank you. A startup is a temporary organization used to search for a repeatable and scalable business model. These are words by Steve Blank. And I want to help most of you understand, as you build SMEs, companies, there's a Kenyan fear phenomenon about failing. And I want you to know you don't get good at this unless things don't work. And sometimes when things don't work, you may be criticized, lose reputationally, but I want to encourage you that it takes getting back up consistently to get there. So I'll catch up with that in a minute. The next slide is from Eric Rice. He says, a startup is a human institution designed to deliver new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty. There's none of us building from a place of vast knowledge or experience, especially if you're innovating. So chances are this is going to be different. In 2005, I made a decision to come back to Kenya. In 2006, I started working for someone here in Kenya. In 2007, I started my first company. Through that entity, I got to learn quite a bit about East Africa. In 2009, I left that entity and went to start what I'd call my first big company, which was known as Mode. 2010 to 2017, I spent those 7-8 years building that company to 28 markets. And I think I just want to give a little CV to earn your right for your ears and not to show off. In 2017, I did $1.2 billion in that company in revenues. I made a margin of about 8% of that initially. The partners came and took out 50% of that margin, started earning 4% of that. And so eventually, I was earning $38 per second through that platform. It was by partnering with experience, partnering with scale, partnering with capacity that enabled us to do that. If time and energy are your two assets, then you should be calculating everything you're doing in your SME by the second. If you don't do that, you will find yourself going for very many meetings, very many sessions, very many forums that do nothing for your bottom line. This is MasterClass. I hope you're ready for me. I was told I'm speaking to some people with a backbone, so I hope you can take some good critique and hear what I have to say with positivity. Tuko pamoja? Okay. If you're going to raise capital for your SMEs and for your businesses, and if you're going to think big, you have to think beyond Kenya. I liked what I was hearing from KRA. I have someone who introduced herself to me on my table. She said her name is Julian. And she works at KRA, and I almost moved. I did not think there's anyone at KRA who has my name. But she's there at my table, and we had a good conversation. And to KRA, I don't think it's so much so that you're transparent and that you're open. I think the one thing I can say from experience with you, I can see my friend Ken is here. Anyone who's thinking big and scaling and building and growing to millions and millions of dollars, if you're looking at us as innovators and entrepreneurs, Kerry, we are going to leave the country. We're not going to leave because you're not transparent and honest. We're going to leave because it's not innovative enough for us to stay in the market. And unfortunately, Kerry is going to lose the Amazons. It's going to lose the eBays of our generation because the environment is just not conducive for those of us who are scaling. And I say that to say at some point in my business as CEO, I was hit by Kerry with a 4.5 billion shilling bill for the revenues we were earning. We were in 28 countries. And so I don't want to speak on what was confidential, but I can speak on what is public. After a lot of work, I'm talking about extreme work, the real bill to Kerry was about 120 million shillings. So 4 billion to 120 is a big skip. The point I'm trying to make is there are certain windows that make things beneficial. I speak even as a pastor and say that the environment for churches by Kerry is just not conducive. If we are going to have corporates give back to the poor and to society, we've got to really review our laws. For Kenya to enter affordable housing in proper essence, over 65 laws had to be changed to make it conducive for us to bring affordable housing to Kenya. What we're saying is, whether it's lobby groups or different thinking hats that are needed, I think it's truly time to reformat the thinking. It's good to reach where you've reached. I'm making an appeal for us to go a little bit further. Those of us who want to build these companies are going to first go find out where we can go if we want to be in more than one country. And I can assure you the haven is not Kenya. Okay. Now that I've made myself a target. My next slide talks about startups. Startups are outsourced R&D. In essence, in the last 5 years, there have been over 38,000 startups that have received amazing financing, and yet they've been experiments. Let me give you an idea of what you'll hear a lot of times that sometimes I'm tired of hearing. The end state for most startups is failure. Have you heard that before? And it is true. It's a fact. It's a fact that for all the people we're looking at here, by the time you get to certain rounds of financing, for those of you involved in any rounds of financing for your business, only a few % of you will make it out alive on the venture you're on right now. Next slide. And the threats are multiplying. Your competition is getting smarter. In 2000, it would take about $5 million to really build a proper tech company and a fintech or whatever it is you were looking to build. As of 2011, with $5,000, you can build a good company. So capital starting is no longer a barrier to what we call a minimal viable product, being able to prove to people that you have something viable that can attract millions and millions of dollars. You have two assets, time and energy. The problem is if you spend so much time on R&D and especially at pilot stage, at the stage where you need to prove a minimal viable product, and I'll tell you what I did after Mode and how I had to go on a retreat for 1 year to completely rethink my entrepreneurial journey. Understanding I have two assets, time and energy. I'm now 46, my plan was to retire at 50, I have 4 years to make it. So time is of essence. Let me talk about fintechs for just a second. I see a few of you here who are experts in this, and Kenya is very blessed to have fintechs. Unfortunately, I keep hearing of unicorns everywhere else except Kenya. Even for those people we've mentored outside Kenya, they're being able to build unicorns. Unicorns are businesses valued at over $1 billion. And if you look on that chart on the next slide, this slide, you'll see that there have been over 30 fintech unicorns valued at close to $252 billion. There's absolutely no reason why your business should only be a Kenyan business. None. I don't care if you sell tomatoes or potatoes. I'm involved in advising a group right now that has just signed an extremely large deal with Eastern Europe for simply sweet potatoes. And they're moving about, 25 to $30 million across Eastern Africa worth of sweet potatoes to Latvia and to some of those economies there. There's absolutely no reason. Next slide, please. So here's the deal. Different kinds of capital are coming, and they're finding smart brains, very smart brains. And I want to tell you, for those of you who've built companies, and I know Ken is holding a masterclass after this. Ken, what's the subject of your masterclass? What's the title? Leaving a company you started. It takes a certain, I've hit the road, I've hit that road hard. Ken has hit that road hard. We've built companies. Cellulant is probably going to be our first unicorn in Kenya, which I'll be so proud to be associated with the founder and known. But we have our stories. If we sit and tell you our stories, you will understand certain things. You'll understand the kind of money you should go for. You'll understand the kind of money that comes to take your company and the kind of money that takes care of the founder. You'll understand that you can put a lot of hard work into something and lose it, or you can put a lot of hard work into something and partner with experience and get scale. You can leave what you started and build something bigger. All these stories are here for you to be able to benefit from. So to Joram and team for putting this together, this is extremely important. You can be on an upscale right now of a startup with $10,000 today and raising about $50 million 12 months from now. It's very possible. Those days of being told that's not possible, it's a lie. It's happening in your country, it's happening in your city. So please pay attention to what I'm about to tell you on this next part. Digital banking. I just had Mr. Isiwe talking to us about UBA Bank, Absa Bank. I went to my bank and I said, here's my experience, here's what I've built, here's what I'm building, here's what I need. And I could not get the bank to give me a shilling. Banks are not going to give you money for your startups. I don't know what they've told you today, but I'm here to tell you, they're not going to give you money for your startups. Here's some simple criteria. I know the bankers here are not happy with me, but they're not going to. They give you 100K for your event. They may give you some little money here and there, but they're not going to. But you have to change your thinking. When I built my new company, I looked at what I was making per second and I understood certain understanding about economies. I went to Safaricom in my new startup, EDOMx, and I said, here's what I want to do. I had a hard time. Despite my experience, I had negotiated 28 markets with telcos, 5 times the size of Safaricom. Indonesia, the telco there has 120 million subscribers. In India, the telco I had, Reliance, had 178 million subscribers. Trust me, it's harder to close with Safaricom than it is to close with an Indian telco. But I did. And I can say that even if they're here because I'm not ashamed to say that it's tough. Our companies and the setup in African companies makes it extremely hard for entrepreneurs to be able to match up to what they expect you to do. So you have to partner with experience, you have to partner with people, you have to partner with friends, you have to be able to grow using people's networks, and that's what you're doing here. So I found out, I raised some money from my new company. I raised a good record money pre-revenue of about $40 million. I did that because of relationships. Relationships are all you need. And I'll tell you this, you can come up with the best business plan if you don't have those relationships at the beginning, because the only kind of people who will invest in you in the beginning are what you call the 3 Fs. Friends, family. So, I took a look at what American Express, I'm just giving you an example because I was told to talk about thinking big. So I looked at what is American Express acquiring right now? What are the kind of businesses that they're targeting? What have they done? So took a look at that. I can share this presentation and leave it if you can't see the companies. And then I said, okay, I'm in fintech, what's Visa acquiring? Because I said I'm going to set myself up for scale, for growth, for possible acquisition. And so I looked at what Visa is acquiring. I looked at what they've built. Some of the stuff they have acquired, it's not so complex. Kenyans have built more complex systems than what some of these guys are buying for ridiculous dollars. And then I looked at what's MasterCard purchasing. And I looked at that chart and I looked at some of those companies and I said, you know, Cellulant was 20 times more complex than some of these companies. And if I look at the prices for what some of those companies were bought for, it's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. The only disadvantage we had is where did we set up our companies? How did we set them up? Who did we partner with? Who knew about us? And what's our global story? Guys, it's all gonna boil down to your story and what you wanna do. Now, I'm a pastor locally. I do care about my country, but I want to tell you something. Your business has to be quite selfish in nature. This ambition that some of us have of employing everybody. I want to employ all the Kenyans. I want to change Africa. That's noble. It is noble. But I want to give you a reality. Your company may not be able to do that at the beginning. If you want to make a change in the continent, make it in your business, become extremely wealthy, and come make the changes you want to make. But don't try and employ everybody in your business because you want to change Africa. You will get broke in an hour. MasterClass. You get broke in an hour. And I've learned this from experience. As much as you have a good heart and you want to change, your business is selfish by nature. It needs bottom line, it needs output, it needs income. You have to calculate it. You have to do your cash flow expectations. You have to do your, you have to know your, you have to know how much cash you're making versus how much cash you're spending. So after looking at this, I decided to test out our ecosystem in Kenya. I went and saw Dr. James Mwangi. I went and saw Safaricom team, and I said, I want to do something. I want to fund SMEs, and I want to fund the consumer. I want to give people credit at zero interest. And they both looked at me and said, before we ask you what you're smoking, just show us the presentation. Now, when you go in front of some of these people, just be prepared, because you may just have 5 minutes. I remember Dr. Mwangi had 45 minutes. I know him personally in different circles, but this was a business presentation, so you don't carry those other relationships there. So we had 45 minutes for the meeting. He came in, the vice president of MasterCard was around, the vice president of IFC was around. So he said, he came 15 minutes late, it was 8:30 from an 8:15 meeting. I said, look, I'm so sorry, I know I gave you 45 minutes, I only have 20. So you have 20 minutes to pitch, think, interpret, do what you have to do, and you're not gonna get this opportunity again. I'm trying to help you now on the pitching side, and I'll talk about a few things. So Amani, show me when I have 10 minutes left. So I said to him, look, this is what I want to do. I want to give people zero interest credit. I think I've cracked the kiosk credit, I think I've cracked the shop credit, and I think I've cracked consumer credit at zero interest. Could you give me more time? Let's put it this way, a 40-minute meeting became a 6-hour meeting without ties, with folded sleeves, with lunch, with ugali, with chapatis, and I knew I've made an entry. Dr. James Mwangi said to me, I have $7 billion of extra capital. I'm going to partner with you and I'm going to give you $1 billion of those dollars. And this is an announcement you'll hear in 3 weeks in case you think I'm just throwing numbers around, but tell you what had worked for me. My experience in my previous company, which people come and they say, I'm so sorry you lost mode. I didn't lose it, I did a deal. You have sometimes to know. Let me tell you something. Sometimes the dream you really have cannot work in the company you started. Because sometimes what you started went in a particular direction that can no longer pivot to the direction you want to go. And sometimes the organization you've started, for those of you who've never read this book, I always recommend it. Excuse the French in that book, but read through the book. It's called The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. The book will teach you that as an entrepreneur, after 5 years of starting, if you have growth and success, the people you have to go to the next phase with may not be the people you started with, because the people you started with may not have the capacity to go past 5 years. Case in point, you made your receptionist an HR manager, And now all of a sudden you have to negotiate EBITDA, what are they called, ESOP negotiations with sophisticated New York people, and that HR person is a deer staring at, just unable to comprehend what in the world you're talking about. And they're just saying, I have no clue what you're talking about. And their inexperience will shout, you're torn between loyalty and destiny. And these are realities. If you're going to grow, you have to get ready for this. So you can pace yourself, go slowly. But if you're coming at the speed of this generation, I assure you, these are some of the challenges you're not going to be able to avoid. So how I built this time is I decided to make sure the people I bring from the beginning had the experience, that they can be able to take it beyond those 5 years, can be able to carry it, because I'm moving at a particular pace. I don't have the time. I have the energy, but I also didn't want to hire children. I needed to hire grown-ups. 10 minutes. I needed to hire grown-ups. And I'll tell you, it's important for your company. You hire children, you'll pay for it. You hire grown-ups, you'll be paid for it. Okay. Next slide. And how you know you've hired children is when you come from lunch and everybody's complaining. And let me leave that story alone. So, this is insurance companies. So there's a word I want to use here called unbundling. So if you can go back, let me see, where am I? Yes, that's fine. Just go forward. So let me show you this. Very important. So by Q1 of 2016, insurance companies were investing in startups. These are the most conservative companies in the world. They were investing at seed level. So everybody is seeing something. But the problem is you're raising your capital where you're not going to necessarily get the help. I'm not a big fan of Kenyan capital, and I'll tell you why. Although luckily now we have a lot of these global investors coming in, but Kenyan capital can be very painful. It's very impatient. These are the people who invest in you, and in 2 weeks they want to know how you're doing. How is the thing turning around? How have you built this? How is it going to scale? So I want you to know, for the same energy, repositioning yourself can make a world of a difference. And these are the conversations I wish some of you could pull. Ken, myself, a few entrepreneurs who've burnt some serious rubber. I'm talking about 15 years. Partner with experience. Because if you partner with experience, if I was in church, I'd tell you that the meaning of grace is using someone else's experience to advance. You need to do that so that you can be able to grow quicker and not repeat our mistakes. Not every private equity money should be taken into your company. Not every venture capitalist money should come into your business. It doesn't matter how sweet it looks. If it's not partnering with you, the founder, it's dangerous, okay? So all these companies, what have people started doing? Next slide. People have unbundled the automobile. People have unbundled Procter & Gamble. Next slide. So if you look at Procter & Gamble, completely unbundled. This is the new world. This is all we are doing. We're just unbundling stuff and changing how I can become an expert at 3 out of 28 things that were bundled before. If you go to the next slide, we're unbundling hotels. So people have unbundled everything from the restaurant experience to the pillow experience to the mattress experience to the dining experience to the flight experience. So people are building companies around this, right? But here's what's interesting is the next slide. The bank is also being unbundled. So we're unbundling the bank. So the genius of Dr. Mwangi, I thought when I sat with him, and I really don't care what anyone says about him, the man is a genius. He saw something. He said, I think you've just cracked the next phase of banking. Because we were able to figure out, how can I get SMEs to have credit at 0 interest? How can I make sure your margin is not touched so that you can grow? And for that inquisition, I think you can meet me afterwards. But it's all digital. You don't have to know me. It's really down to your business, and how you build that out is up to you. So we got access to $1 billion, not just for Kenya, for across Africa. And I want to raise even more than that so that we can be able to move money across SMEs and consumers. So we're launching a product with Safaricom. It's on your phone right now, *799#. It's called Faraja. And that product, it's already live, but we're going to launch it on June 29th, I think. But let me show you some important statistics as you build your SME. Next slide, please. Next one. Millennials were taken through a very big practice. This was across the world. 18% of them switched from their primary bank in the last 12 months. 40% of them would consider banking with Google. I want you to know, you and I sitting here are not the market. 59% think financial products are not targeted at them. 79% view their relationship with their bank as transactional. If you look at where to set up, next slide because of my time, regulators across the world are lowering regulation while Kenya is increasing regulation. So they're lowering regulations for tech entrants, Hong Kong, Singapore, Delaware. So, Kerry, the challenge I'm making is not personal, is to say, I think it's best to get the latest scripts and understand why are we going there and not here. Yet the funding we're getting will even come from here to go service us in those markets. Chile, Mexico, they've lowered the entrant levels for Fintechs. So if I come to Kenya and I look at Central Bank of Kenya wants to regulate us more, while Hong Kong is telling me, I've dropped regulation, come. So there are major shifts, next slide, in consumer expectations, major shifts in digital buying, there are major shifts in product relevance. So your response in the next slide to disruptive thinking is, what will drive you? What will drive your organization personality? Is it the fear of getting screwed? Or the fear of missing out? Fogs or FOMO? If you go to the next slide, as I speak to the Safaricoms and to the equity banks, I need you guys to realize that this is not about Godzilla versus King Kong anymore. I was speaking in Singapore at a conference and I had Citibank on my right and Deutsche Bank on my left, very intimidating. One group is handling $27 trillion in assets, the other group is handling $40 trillion in assets, and there was an African in between. And I was like that little girl in between that picture. But the point is, whether you recognize us or not, the things we hear from those who have a fog's mindset is in the next slide. They don't have our balance sheet. Our brand is trusted, so don't worry about these guys who are innovating. Supply chain is very complex. By the time they catch up with us, this is a highly regulated industry. This is the comfort you'll hear from large organizations that have refused to change. We've been doing this for 140 years. Clients trust us. They will not go to some startup. We have a cost advantage. Our risk management capabilities are proven, but there's a new enemy. Next slide. It's called death by 1,000 cuts. Where so many you're not seeing us coming. We are unbundling all the industries you can imagine, from banking to transport and logistics. It's getting unbundled in ways you'll never imagine. I have met more Nigerians coming to Kenya doing startups and raising capital than I've met Kenyans who are raising capital. I'm telling you, in the last 6 months, I don't know what's going on. It's like Kenya has become a new haven for them. So, tons of startups that will impact your industry, they'll fail. But you should not be worried about the ones who fail. Next slide. The problem is the ones that will actually succeed that you should worry about. So, ladies and gentlemen, there's been over 375 deals of over 5.6 billion done in 1 quarter in 2018. This has changed significantly. There have been 33 fintech unicorns across the world as at this time. I believe Kenya is overdue for unicorns so that we can make the way for the next generation for innovation and for growth. I do believe for you to be able to understand and not feel like a failure when things are not working, please remember, startups are experiments. Thank you very much.